Okay, a very good morning to my dear students. Welcome to the second part of chapter Subject and Predicate for Standard 4. I am your very own Rahul sir. So without any further delay, let's start. Students, in the previous video of this chapter Subject Predicate, I gave you an introduction about what is subject and what is predicate. I also told you that what makes a predicate. I'll have a quick recap of that first. In the previous video, my dear students, I told you that subject is the doer of the action. Means, in a sentence, if somebody is performing the action, he or she will become the subject. And verb is the action word, means the work that is performed in a sentence comes under the category of verb. And finally comes the object. Object was, my dear students, the receiver of the action. Means if the subject is doing an action, somebody has to receive that action, and the object is the receiver of that particular action. Now, for an example, I would like to say that if I eat an apple, for example, if I eat an apple, I will become the subject. My action of eating will become the verb, and my action is falling upon that apple, and it will become the object. Then I told you that, as the name of the chapter suggests, subject and predicate. Predicate includes two parts, verb and object. Means verb and object, they both make the predicate. This was the recap of the previous lecture that we did in part 1 of this chapter. And I promise that in the next part, I am going to teach you the rules of placements of subjects in different types of sentence. Means how we can place different subjects in different types of sentence. My dear students, as we know that sentences were of 4 types: assertive or declarative, imperative, interrogative, and finally exclamatory sentence, my dear students. Assertive sentences were such sentences that convey a kind of information. Imperative sentences were such sentences with the help of which we gave any command or request or advice. Interrogative sentences were used to ask any kind of questions, my dear students. And finally came the exclamatory sentence, with the help of which we expressed a kind of strong emotion. All this I taught you in my previous videos. Now, coming to today's class, where I am going to teach you the different types of rules of placing the subject for different type of sentences. Then I'll give you one simple exercise which you need to note, and we will discuss that exercise in the third part of this chapter. So let's start. Look at the first rule, my dear students, where I have written, in most sentences, the subject usually comes before the verb. In most sentences means this is the general rule. And the general rule is that in most sentences, the subject comes before the verb. And this rule I also taught you where I was teaching you structure of framing a correct sentence. If you remember, I taught you the correct structure of structuring a sentence, framing a sentence, was S plus V plus O. Means first came the subject, then came the verb, and then came finally the object. And that same structure has been discussed in rule number 1. Now, if you look at the example carefully, where I have written, my coat is red. Now, in this sentence, my dear students, we all know that my coat is the subject. My coat is the subject. Is, the word is came under the category of verb. The word is came under the category of verb. Now, there might arise a question in your mind that, sir, in the previous videos you told actions like playing, talking, running, slapping were verbs. But you are saying in this video that is also a verb. Yes, my dear student. The verb that I taught you in the structure are basically of two different types. One is the main verb and the other is the helping verb or be verb, my dear student. Main verbs contain words like playing, running, eating, jumping, sleeping, etc. And words like is, am, are, shall, will, etc. Where, was, they come under the category of be verb or helping verb. That is why I said that is a verb. Understood? Now, if you observe this sentence carefully, you will find that the verb came after the subject. The verb came after the subject means we can also say that the subject came before the verb in this sentence. This is the general rule that I wrote in the first point. Now coming to the second point, my dear student. In imperative sentences, the subject is implied. Now, we all know that sentences which contain request, sentences which contain command or advice, they come under the category of imperative sentence, and in imperative sentences, the subject is implied. Implied actually means understood. We did not mention the subject specifically. No. For implied sentences, for imperative type of sentences rather, we never mention the subject because it is implied. Like, shut up. Now, if I am looking at a particular student or a particular class and I am asking them to shut up, of course, it is a command and it is implied that I am telling to shut up to that student or to that person on which I am looking at. And that is why for imperative sentences, my dear students, the subject remains implied. Few more examples is like sit down. If I am looking at a puppy and telling the puppy to sit down, of course, the puppy will become the subject. It is understood. It is quite implied. Now, I hope I made the first and the second point clear to you. Now, coming to the third point, my dear students, where I have written, in exclamatory sentences, the subject comes before the verb. Now, if you compare the first point and the third point, you will find a similarity that the general rule was that the subject came before the verb. And in point number 3 also, like in exclamatory sentences also, I have written the same thing. The subject comes before the verb. The example that I have written is, What a great singer she is. Now, here, if you observe, she is the subject. She is the subject. And is, again, as I told you, is a verb. And it is an exclamatory type of sentence. So, for exclamatory sentences also, the subject comes before the verb. Means point 1 and point 3, they both are similar, they both are same. Now there is a slight change in the last point, which is point number 4. Means for interrogative sentences, note down students, in interrogative sentences, the subject does not come before the verb. Means what? It comes after the verb. In interrogative sentences, my dear students, the subject comes after the verb. Now, for example, are you ready to go? Now, here, are, as I told you, is a helping verb and you is the subject. Now, you can easily see that are means verb came before the subject. In the previous two type of sentences, the subject came before the verb. But here, verb came before the subject, means the subject came after the verb. Now, I hope I made all the 4 points clear, and I also taught you where to place the subjects in different type of sentences. Now, I am giving you few examples, means few questions that you need to note down and solve. We will discuss those questions in my part 3 of this chapter. Please note down this question. This is the heading. This is the heading. Few conceptual questions related to chapters. Question number 1, iron is a heavy metal. Question number 2, he refused the order. Question number 3, dad bought a new toy today. Question number 4, the moon is shining brightly. Question number 5, shut up. Question number 6, we slept in our bed comfortably. And finally, question number 7, the police caught the thief. Now, in all these 7 questions, you just need to find out the subject, the verb, and the object. The subject, the verb, and the object. Hope to see you in the third part of the video with your solutions. Thank you for today.